let's get into my observations before we get to Hoyne, Gerard. And I just want to start with number one, and I want to continue with the Ken Hinkley theme.
Yep.
I just want to say the Hinkley Kosh haters are getting very boring. I want to say to the Port supporters that are complaining about this, stop sooking about the coach. It was the only logical decision to make, as if you are going to hold off on this announcement and potentially disrupt the finals campaign that you have earned a top 4 position for right now. You're not going to do it. You will not disrupt a finals campaign where you're a really good shot at winning a premiership. Ken Hinkley's record is amazing, really. And I know they'll say, well, he hasn't got to a grand final. We lost 2 prelims by a kick. One of those prelims, the team kicked 3 goals, 9 in the first quarter and lost by a goal. The other one was off the back of a insufficient intent decision late in the game that could have gone either way. That is how close they've been to getting to a grand final. The guy wins 60% of the games that he coaches, and I'd argue that no coach bar Sam Mitchell has achieved more with less this season. He develops his players. Zach Butters was going to leave if Ken Hinkley left a season ago. How do you reckon Port fans would cop if Zach Butters was playing for Melbourne right now if Ken Hinkley had have left? The development of the younger players, you can speak to that over the last 10 to 12 years. Look at how much a better player Jason Horne-Francis is under Ken Hinkley than what he was at North Melbourne last year is just one example. Players don't leave. Coaches want to come and coach with him. So just stop hating and put yourself in the position of 14 other teams in the lead up to these finals who would kill to be in your team's position. Enjoy finals. Enjoy that your team has a chance to win it. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they're good enough, but you're in the fight and celebrate what has been a significant day for the footy club. And you got to keep Josh Carr as well. So it's the perfect...
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win all round. So just enjoy it for at least a day or two. Observation number 2. I liked your commentary of the ice block, Finn McGuinness on Sunday, Gerard.
Yep.
And I often think about how the great midfielders of yesteryear, and go back as far as your day, and we've spoken to Jono about that, and when tagging came in, and then you can go forward to names such as Crawford and Judd and Ablett and Black and Buckley. These guys were tagged every week. So to see midfielders unable to cope with it now, and you saw it, you described every player that McGuinness went to didn't know what to do, didn't know where to turn, did not know what to do.
That's why it's so powerful.
It is. Libba just turns up and gets 30.
Yep.
Couldn't get near it because he had someone on him. Lachie Neale turns up and gets 30. Well, not the last 3 weeks because he's had a tagger on him. So I'd actually love to chase down Simon Black, Lawrence, and I wonder if he just laughs at these modern midfielders who are unable to cope when there is any sense of attention to them. Errol Goulden tagged for the first time. Didn't know what to do. I love seeing it, and I love seeing the effect that has on the game's best midfielders today, but also how well the champions of yesteryear were able to cope with it every week. It was a real skill.
I think Sam Mitchell was giving everyone a lesson. Not only did he whack it on the midfield guns, he's banged it straight onto Bailey Dale and took him out of the game. I mean, it is really difficult getting a kick when
hard.
someone is sent out there just to stop you getting kicked. They're not interested in the footy. They run past the Sharon to make sure you're not getting near it.
Well, he would know as well, Sam. Like he had some of the game's best taggers go to him every week as well. Yeah, he had Lingy, he had Crowley, he had all of them. So, it's just been interesting observing that, particularly over the last 5 or 6 weeks. I've enjoyed the entertainment of it. Observation number 2, just want to speak a little bit about North because they've been so heavily invested in their midfield. Have they neglected to build the backline, Gerard? I think that's got to be their focus. So Zeebel's gone. Mackay's going to go. Aaron Hall's gone to a lesser extent. Griffin Logue is out for 12 months. I'm not sure about Core and McDonald and whether they can hold up in a finals team and whether they would make it in a top 8's backline. So there's...
Well, Griffin Logue they targeted, so that's a tick.
But he's out for
an ACL, so they're going to have to find someone.
So they're going to have to invest heavily, I think, in the draft in terms of the defensive stocks. I don't mind them forward of the ball with Zerha and Larky. I really like their midfield. They're okay in the ruck. Cherry's fine, and that's all you need. Ruckman like Cherry, but clearly there's a big gulf of talent in their back 6. And that was noticeable. I thought their effort was pretty good on the weekend, but their ball use when the Silky players didn't get their hands on it clearly stood out. Observation number 3, if you could have any player in the competition to have possession of the ball 70 metres out from their own goal, Gerard, I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. Yeah, so like so it used to be probably a Dustin Martin for me or a Buddy Franklin. If they had possession of the ball 70 metres out, you knew it was going to lead to a score. I think there's a new king, and I think it's Charlie Curnow. I think
he's a magnificent kick.
Weapon.
Yeah. That's a great call.
He just whacks it with power and penetration, and it gets to the destination quicker than any other player, I think. So
you're getting into the data territory, and Hoyne's starting to raise an eyebrow. So he's going to have a look at that, because I know he fingered a couple of midfielders over in the West last year because they don't kick the ball inside forward 50 with enough accuracy.
Oomph.
I was going to say Rosie.
Yeah,
but
Butters is a good one too.
And
but
Butters,
I don't know if they got the power that
they haven't got the weaponry. No,
so it's like the oomph. He's got a real oomph in his kick. And I haven't checked the data. That's just on the eye.
Why don't champion do oomph data?
Oomph data. So who would you have? Ball 70 metres out from their own goal. Charlie Curnow emerging as a real weapon. So not only inside forward 50, but also outside. Observation number 4. I think he might be one of your favourites, Gerard. But what's happened to Caleb Daniel? And maybe it's one for Hoyne. For so long, he's been able to succeed despite his size. Wherever he's played, he has had a positive effect on his team. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. A couple of times he was bullied on the weekend. He went inside, and I thought Jai Newcombe, he wasn't the only one he made look silly, Jai Newcombe, but just brushed them off. He missed a big tackle out of a centre bounce that we showed on Footy Classified last night.
Yep.
And then when he does go back, I think teams have been able to expose him a little bit. And the most alarming thing is he's not getting the footy enough, and he's not doing the damage that he once did with the footy. So just to watch on the All-Australian Caleb Daniel and his form drop off this year. Observation number 5, I think we're up to. I just saw a little glimpse from my man Denver Granger Barras on the weekend. Just a little. He took a terrific contested mark.
Was he there as a negative player initially?
Oh, I don't know if he was there. We'll speak to Sam Mitchell on Friday. It was a late inclusion for Brandon Ryan, and came in and played for it. I thought he did what he needed to do. Now, it wasn't
a couple of rays of sunshine there for sure.
Just a couple of rays. So I lost a lot of money after buying a significant amount of stock in him early days, and was made to look a little bit foolish. But I'm just not selling. I'm just holding on. Just holding on to that. And observation number 7, and finally, just to watch on the Cats. So they're famous for not training much, and it's been a hot topic of mine, and I think a few people have started to come on for the ride, is how little some teams are training, and they're the masters of it, and it's worked for them so well. Mm-hmm. But when you start making really costly errors, and I may be looking too forensically in this and drawing too long a bow, but when Isaac Smith misses a kick from 15 metres away and turns it over, when Radigalia drops the easiest of uncontested marks inside his defensive 50, which costs a goal, when Kolajasmi comes storming out and drops a chest mark, then he tries to pick it up and fumbles, and that costs a goal, I just think, are you sharp enough? Are you training enough? And only they will be able to answer that question. Has the lack of training and intensity at training led to some very uncharacteristic skill errors at the Cats? And I wonder whether they will be prepared to, admit that or change up their training routine that has worked so well for them. They're the observations out of the round.
Nice work, Kane.
Would love your thoughts on that.
And we'll start with the overall observation from the weekend. And the observation for me is you are who you are at this stage of the year. And we keep talking, people keep thinking that there's this so-called flick of the switch that exists. It does not exist at all. So it was a cracking round of footy, 5 games decided by under 10 points. But there were 3 examples from the weekend as to why teams lost, which has been their number one issue for the whole year.
Yep.
So I thought Geelong did a lot right Friday night.
Yes.
They did a lot right, and took it up to Collingwood and could have potentially won that game. But to concede 29 scores from 45 entries, that's the worst defensive performance we've seen by any team this year outside of playing against West Coast this year. And as a result, they've been 16th for the year at conceding scores from inside 50. So that's the reason why they are where they are at the moment.
Do you think there was a bit of I told you so in that opening observation, Kane?
Sorry.
No, mate, a little, because we get caught up. Like last week, has the wheel turned for the Bulldogs, and you do question it after seeing what you see, and they pile on 9 goals in the first quarter against Richmond. You go, oh, hang on, something happened here. But continually, you're reminded, Hoyne, when challenged, they do revert back to what they are, which I guess is your point that you're making tonight.
Yeah, and that's why we sort of don't get sucked in just to the wins and losses of week to week. It's the big picture stuff, and the big picture stuff is always going to come back to sort of determining how your season actually goes. Adelaide, as good as Adelaide were on the weekend,
Yep.
to concede 99 points, that's the reason why you lost. And across the course of the season, you've been the 7th easiest team in the competition to turn possession into a score against. That's going to be the reason why you're going to finish where you're going to finish. GWS, as well as GWS defend their defensive 50 and they hold up extremely well. The reason why they have to defend their defensive 50 so well is because they can't defend the ball up the ground. We saw Sydney the week before score 68 or whatever, I think 68 or 70 points from their defensive half. Port Adelaide were able to move the ball at absolute will from one end of the ground to the other. Across the last 6 weeks, they're 16th at defending ball movement. That was a huge reason as to why they lost the game against Port Adelaide on the weekend. And then you move forward, and I just want to get ahead of time a little bit here. So Melbourne, there's a lot of talk around Melbourne and Grundy and what they're going to do with Grundy and what have you. The reason why Melbourne might not have success is because of their offense.
Yep.
To be 12th at turning scores, at turning inside 50s into score, and their ball movement game as well. But the reason as to why they are potentially going to win the flag or play on grand final day is what they're doing defensively. I mean, that game on the weekend against Carlton was exceptional in terms of what they did defensively. If you Port Adelaide, yes, that was a good win on the weekend against GWS, but you still leaked 87 points.
Yep.
Against GWS without Toby Bedford and without Brent Daniels, and that's been the issue for Port Adelaide across this campaign. Is this defensive group going to be able to hold up? And then if you're St Kilda, if you're looking at what they're going to do come finals time, in terms of what they do at converting entries into scores, there's no team that struggles to do that more than what St Kilda do this year. So that, at some stage, will be the undoing for them in terms of where this campaign actually finishes up. So you are who you are, and just don't expect things just to flick the switch and all of a sudden you're going to show up this different profile with 2 weeks to go before finals.
Is anybody playing anywhere near as well as Geelong did as we head towards the serious end of the season, where Geelong won 16 in a row to win it? But a long way out, you declared them.
Yeah, no, there's no one. There's no one even close.
Right.
There's no one even close to them. There's no one even close to what Melbourne did in 21, and there's no one close to what Richmond did in 19 and 20, heading into a finals campaign. So that's why the competition's so great at the moment, because it's so tight, and you can mount a case comfortably for 4, 5, 6 teams. But there's no one at the moment that's got the perfect profile like those teams did heading into a finals campaign.
All right, let's launch into your 7 main talking points from the round, and I guess we'll start with a team who does know who they are. That's the Blues.
Yeah, and who they are has been this absolute clearance machine now for an 8-week period. But the good thing, I think, for Carlton is if you're moving forward, is that wasn't the reason as to why you were where you were at three-quarter time against Melbourne in what felt like a prelim final type of game of footy. You scored 0 goals at three-quarter time from your clearance work. You've been averaging close to 10 goals a game over a 2-month period.
Yep.
So to have that taken away from you by what is probably the best defensive team in the competition, but then to still find a way to be able to introduce and to be able to score off the back of your turnover work. That's why we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. That's why it is a different team to what it was 10 weeks ago. You had your number one weapon taken away for 3 quarters. You still found a way to hang in. And then to start that last quarter to get the 3-goal lead, that's when your weapon came into play. So to be able to win a different way to what you have over 2 months against what probably is almost the best team in the competition at the moment, was a huge tick to them. And just a little shout out to Nick Newman. So I think he controls the game for Carlton behind the ball, probably more than any other defender they have, on their list at the moment. Probably, including Wiedering as well. So his ability just to be able to be that outlet, to be that uncontested mark option, and then to just calm the footy down, and just calm the play down and get the ball going back Carlton's way. He's in absolutely fantastic nick at the moment.
Is this his best ever year?
Oh, comfortably. So, he's the 5th highest rated general defender in the competition over the last 6-week period. So he's absolutely flying. It'll be interesting to see if any teams do anything to him over the next couple of weeks.
A little bit of ice block treatment.
But potentially, who knows what Gold Coast do this week. But he's going well, and he's so important to what they do.
Well, if Gold Coast do it, they'll let him off the hook at half time.
Yeah, they will.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the Bombers?
Yeah, so, and it was interesting just hearing Cal, sort of just talking to you guys before about the the key defensive stocks and the merry-go-round going on there. So obviously Essendon are in that situation at the moment in terms of what they do with Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, and there has been a bit of positivity around what he's been able to do this year. Or do they actually invest and spend the money going towards sort of a Ben Mackay type option? And watching Nick Larkey again on the weekend, to me, I think if you're Essendon, that's where you are going. You're going to go down the Ben Mackay option. So quite often this year, so we've seen Hawkins really take a hold of Zerk-Thatcher twice. We've seen Oscar Allen do it. We've seen Jamara Ugle-Hagan do it, and then we've seen Nick Larkey on the weekend kick 5. So if you have a look at what sort of Ben Mackay offers from an intercept perspective, he's won 24 more intercept possessions this year than what Zerk-Thatcher has. Importantly, he's taken 58 more intercept marks than what he does, and he's a far harder player to beat in a one-on-one contest. So I get the debate that would be having at an Essendon list management perspective, because you would probably get one bloke on the cheap and the other bloke's going to come at significant cost. But I think for where this list is at, to be able to get a significant key defender behind the ball who is that intercept marker, yes, he's a little bit sort of uncertain with ball in hand. That might change with a better sort of team and personnel around him. But I think they need to seriously sort of have a look at that debate and have a look at which way they go down that path.
Two elements of the defence, so you've got your man-on-man sort of defence, which involves the defenders, but then there's the transitional defence. What's more important, to sort out the key post or the transition?
I think when you're looking at Essendon, I think they have the transition defenders around a Ben Mackay. So that if you have a look at a Ridley and a Redmond and a McGrath and a Hind and these guys, they have those transition players around them. They don't have that absolute sort of key intercept, guerrilla lockdown sort of defender that you can a lot of the time take to the bank that he's going to do a reasonable job.
Hoyne, I'm just going off a tangent here a little bit away from your points, but I just wanted to ask you a question because last night I said on Footy Classified that any forward who comes up against Darcy Moore in the finals would be licking their lips for a couple of reasons. I think he's been a bit scatty. He hasn't quite impacted when he's pressed. He hasn't been as good one-on-one, and he certainly hasn't been as good offensively. Now, Josh Jenkins defended him really strongly on SEN Breakfast this morning. He said, look, his role isn't to play one-on-one. He just plays, they play in a triangle. He doesn't have an opponent. He's relying on pressure up the field from the midfield so he can get a high ball and intercept. But my point, I think, still stands that if you've got a smart forward and you know you're not going to have an opponent in Moore, you can expose him badly. What have the numbers said about his start to the year and his last month or so? And is he vulnerable? Does he get a lot of goals kicked on him?
Yeah, so a two-part answer to this. So one, just the individual sense, he isn't having the same impact as what he did, for the first 3 to 4 months of the season, where he was an All-Australian lock. In terms of his ability to be able to impact the play from a ball winning and a ball use perspective, that has dropped over the last 4 or 5 weeks. The interesting component to that from a team perspective is that this is what Collingwood do. They give you a genuine look going back the other way. And we've spoken about this a lot. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, they are the 5th easiest team in the competition to score against when you go inside 50, because they give you a lock. And whether or not he's actually trying to do too much, and whether or not he's actually trying to cover too much, and whether or not he might need to get back to basics and actually just try and lock down first and foremost. I mean, I go back to that qualifying final last year. I don't know if you guys remember it. But when he played on Tom Hawkins last year, that was one of the best defensive games I've seen by a key defender in a long time. Playing on the All-Australian key forward in a huge final to take 7 intercept marks, but then importantly, Hawkins had no impact, very little impact that day, and it almost got Collingwood over the line against the team that won the flag by 14 goals. So whether or not he needs to get back to that, and whether or not that means that Collingwood need to go away from what they do as a defensive unit, it's going to be interesting to see.
And they're not going to be able to work on it for the home and away season because he'll be back for the first final. It's number 11th and 12th rated player under Champion Data's 100x new rating system. One plays for Melbourne, one plays for Port Adelaide. And they both play in the same position. I haven't had a look at any of the guesses. I haven't spoken to anyone. I haven't looked at any of the numbers. I'm going to say Cade Chandler and Sam Powell-Pepper.
Well, it's not bad. It's not a bad guess, Kane. Not right, but not a bad guess. They actually are both going quite well at the moment.
Let me go through a couple. Jack Viney and Butters from James. Sam Powell-Pepper, Keziah Pickett.
Nope.
Cozzy Pickett and Dan Houston. No, they don't play same spots.
No.
Stephen May and Connor
No.
don't play in the same spots.
All right, so these guys are two halfback flankers. The number 11 rated player on the 100X over the last 6 weeks for Melbourne is Trent Rivers.
Wow.
And the number 12 for Port Adelaide is Ryan Burton.
Gee whiz.
So
Burton was dropped throughout the year.
He was dropped at round 12, and is sort of round 12, round 13. Since he's come back in. Now, let me explain as to why that's the case. So I'll start with the Rivers magnet. I'm interested to see where this magnet actually goes over the next 2 weeks and then into final series. There is no better kick in the competition over the last 6 weeks than what Trent Rivers is. He's kicking close to 20% above expectation based on the type of kicks that he's actually trying to pull off. So we've spoken a lot on this show about the halfback flankers and their creativity and what they do behind the ball to generate your transition game offensively and how important they are. I think, and I'll put my hand up to it as well. I think if we all went around and thought, who is that player for Melbourne, we'll probably go to Christian Salem.
Yep.
Right. I think we need to have a look at this guy and see whether or not Melbourne can inject this guy into the game even more so over the next 2 weeks based on what he's actually doing at the moment. He's having such significant impact in terms of what he's doing when he actually wins it. And when he wins it back, he's also top 10 in terms of impact in that phase of the
What
game.
did you have in mind, moving one magnet that's working perfectly? You want to stick him in the middle?
No, I just move him higher up the ground a little bit, just to try. I'm a little bit cautious on it, given that we are in the runway phase that we talk about a lot.
You are who you are.
I'm a little bit cautious about it. But if you can get this guy involved a little bit more, that would be interesting. Then the Ryan Burton one. So we just pumped up how well Trent Rivers is going with ball in hand. Ryan Burton is the 6th best kick in the competition.
Is that a surprise to you, Kane?
No, you know what he's excellent at? He's an excellent kicker-innerer. His kick-ins, he hits it to about 45 metres just to the right, and he finds a little hole in there, and he's fearless with his kick-in. So that doesn't surprise me. His ball use is excellent. Sometimes it's more, for me, he's a frustrating player because of his mobility. And sometimes he's got a bit of Justin Westhoff about him. Like he's trying, but he just looks like he's not at the intensity of the level. And sometimes he gets exposed one-on-one.
Can I just throw it out there too, Kane, just before we just leave Ryan Burton? I just want to give him a little bit of credit in terms of what he's doing defensively as well. So when I heard Ken Hinkley pre-game and he comes out and he had nothing to hide and you go, Ryan Burton's going straight to Toby Green. Well, he's the most damaging player in the competition here. This is going to be really interesting to see how it was. And Toby really didn't have any impact on the game in the first half. And, a lot of that was due to what Port Adelaide were doing up the ground. But Ryan Burton's record this year on Toby Green, Jeremy Cameron, Gary Rowan, Charlie Cameron and Jamie Elliott as 5 or 6 examples. He's kept them way below their expectation this year. So I just talked about Port Adelaide's defence and that being the concern. If this guy can keep going, lock down on one of the most dangerous opponents and then offer that kicking offensively, who knows what that can do for Port Adelaide.
That's one of your gems, one of your better stats for the year so far, Hoyne. The data doesn't lie.
The data doesn't lie. So that's Guess Who for this week.
I'll give you an introduction I know I'm going out of order here, but I've got to get it out. This is almost borderline, I told you so. What happened to Nick Martin's rating after being back on a wing, says Ben from Adelaide.
He was very good on the weekend, wasn't he? He was, what did he have? He had 30-odd and kicked 2 goals or 3 goals, whatever it was. So,
nice selection move from you, Hoyne.
Hey,
it's good. Well done, Brad.
Hoyne, Isaac Heeney was an All-Australian last year. He's been a frustrating player for the first portion of the year. Has he come good?
Yeah, no, he has. And I think we just need to view him a little bit differently to what we have viewed Isaac in the past. I think that a lot of us, and myself included, have viewed him as this, aerial threat, if you like, and that's sort of been his point of difference in the position that he plays. But over the second half of the year, only Toby Green has had more impact on the game as a general forward type player in the competition. But Isaac is doing it at ground level this year as opposed to doing it in the air. So again, only Toby has won more forward 50 ground ball this year than what Isaac Heeney has. And we haven't said that before about Isaac over his career. So he's winning over 50% of his ball
on the deck.
Sort of in that contested situation overall. And he's only been targeted 23 times inside 50 over the last 7 or 8 weeks. So he's not that forward 50 target. He's not that aerial threat. He's actually changed his game now to be this ground ball player and offer sort of a different proposition, sort of to the opposition coach's box. So I think if you're playing against Isaac Heeney, you need to view him and put a slightly different magnet on him than what you probably have done in the past.
His pressure rating would be pretty high too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, it's been pretty reasonable. They're a pretty high pressure team overall, the Swans, and he goes okay. In that
Are you
phase.
doing any work on the structure of a forward line? 2 tools versus 3 tools as a correlation to pressure?
No, we haven't.
Something to work on for you.
Haven't really. It's another project that you can throw at us, Joe.
Thank you.
Where did Hugh McCluggage's game rate on the weekend? I thought he was amazing.
Yeah, no, he was. That was one of his highest rated games of the season. And I think the aspect of his game that was really impressive was his ability to be able to win contest and win clearance rather than the outside ball. So that was the most contested possessions he's won in a game for 3 years, and that was the most clearances he's won in a game this year. And it just poses an interesting question because over the last 4 weeks, teams have now brought this stoppage game to Brisbane. So we've talked a lot on this show around Brisbane, up until 4 weeks ago, being the most potent team on turnover that we've seen for 8 years. So if you play that transition game against Brisbane, they will kill you based on what they actually do offensively. But over the last 4 weeks, they've been involved in 80-plus stoppages for 4 weeks in a row in perfect conditions.
Yep. Fremantle?
AFL averages around about that 60 to 65. So they've been involved in 80, and then as a result, no one has won the ball back off the opposition less than what Brisbane have. So they haven't been able to actually get involved in this, sort of high turnover, high transition game where they're so potent offensively. If that's going to be the case, that they're going to be, sort of playing this stoppage game, given what's happening with Lachie Neale at the moment, this guy has to go to work seriously over the next 6 weeks if Brisbane are actually going to win the flag. If Lachie Neale is the one that's going to get locked away, well then, with no Ashcroft, this guy is the one that's going to need to do what he did against Adelaide if Brisbane are going to have that success over the next 6 weeks.
Has Lachie Neale had an All-Australian year?
No, nowhere near it. No, nowhere near it. I think this is where we can get seduced by just having a look at raw numbers. You've got to have a look at the impact that he's actually having on matches and the impact that he's having, with ball in hand this year is just absolutely nowhere near it compared to what Lockie's produced.
Let's take that under advisement as we move on to the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, so move on to the Dogs and just speaking about ball in hand. So we're talking a lot around what's actually happening with the Dogs at the moment. I just want to talk about their ball use as a team and then at the individual sense. So over the last 6 weeks, they are using the ball by foot the second worst of any team in the competition. So as a result of that, their inability to be able to use the ball effectively is putting so much pressure on their clearance game. So if they don't win clearance and then the ball goes back the other way and they're starting from the back half, because they are using the ball so well, they are no threat to you offensively. So over the last 6 weeks, they've only scored 60 points from their D50, which is 16th in the competition. This is why the clearance game is so important to them. Hawthorn take that away from them on the weekend by only 6. They only win clearances by 6. Then the Dogs have nothing to throw back at you because when they actually do win the ball, they simply just can't use it. So
which is ridiculous when you got Ed Richards, Bailey Dale, Daniels.
So Bailey Dale is the exception. Yep. So he is, over the last 6 weeks, he is a top 40 rated kick in the competition. He's the only Bulldog to be a top 40 rated, sort of kick in the competition. Kane mentioned it before around Caleb Daniel. It's amazing the drop-off in his ball use. Yes, he wasn't able to win it on the weekend and he struggled to win it against GWS, but even when he does win it, there's sort of none of that creativity which he's sort of been renowned for over the last 6 or 7 years. He's kicking 8% below expectation. Treloar, 7% below expectation. And then in the front half, where Norton gets it, he's kicking 4% below expectation. So if this aspect doesn't sort of improve for the Dogs in the next fortnight, I'll be very surprised if they're able to get over the line against Geelong in that round 24 game, which is probably going to be their season on the line, sort of that night.
And you've had some strong thoughts on the Pies this year as we move on to them as your final talking point this round.
Yeah, so I don't think Collingwood are going that well at the moment. I think that they do have a few issues, sort of in play, and I think one of the issues that they do have in play is whether or not they can actually start generating some actual good looks going inside 50. So over the last 6 weeks, only twice have they generated 50 plus inside 50s. Twice. 4 of those 6 games, they've generated under 45 entries. So if you go back to last year's final series, all 9 winners had 50-plus inside 50s in their wins, right? But the thing for Collingwood at the moment that is keeping them in games is what they're doing inside forward 50. There is no forward 50 that's functioning better at the moment than what Collingwood's did. And I'll take you back to that first point that we used, sort of to start the show. To score 29 times from 45 inside 50s was the reason alone why they got over the line against Geelong on the weekend. That was the best forward 50 that we've seen by any team this year, minus playing West Coast this year. So, and then Jack Chris, I just want to throw Jack Chris on the radar. So he's gone back behind the ball. He's so important at the moment in terms of what Collingwood have been able to do in their counter-attack game. He's generated the 4th most points of any player in the competition off his counter-attack play from behind centre. So that magnet is working. The forward 50 is working. How they generate more looks going inside 50 is going to be on watch for the next 2 weeks.
So who are you specifically fingering there?
I'm just having a look at that midfield group.
Yeah.
You know, I've been sort of, a little bit questionable on Geelong's midfield group. That Geelong midfield group really did get a hold of them from a pure clearance perspective.
So would you rob Peter to pay Paul Crisp from the half-back line to stick him into the middle to just tidy up their speed a bit?
I would have a look at it. Yeah, I'd absolutely have a look at it. So that's on watch for Collingwood for the next 2 weeks.
Hoyne, let's whip through who the coaches missed as you compare them to your rankings on the weekend.
Yeah, so Isaac Heeney, who we just touched on before, so he didn't get a vote. 3rd highest rated player on the ground, 3rd highest rated general forward for the weekend. So 17 disposals, 11 contested possessions. We need to judge this guy and view this guy a little bit differently to how we've done in the past.
Do you think the Swans underrate him at the moment, the role he's playing?
I think a little bit. Yeah, no, I think a little bit. I think he's going along quite nicely.
What about the Brisbane game? They just held on against Adelaide.
Yeah, so Hugh McCluggage, we just spoke about, he had a really important role to play. This guy is going to have a huge role. So Zach Bailey on the weekend didn't get a vote, 5th highest rated player on the ground, the highest rated mid forward for the weekend. So, what he does with ball in hand is so damaging. Only 18 disposals, but it's all territory, almost 450 metres gained and 2 goals. He needs to have a blinder of a 6-week period for the Lions as well.
All right, Sam Docherty ended up on the bench, but before that he was pretty good.
Yeah, so I just jotted this down at the time because on our ratings, he was the highest rated player on the ground before he actually went off. So he was a bit of a loss there for Carlton, and full credit to him as well. I think he embraced that prelim final sort of type conditions. 10 ground ball gets, haven't really associated that with Sam Docherty. That's his equal most in 6 years there, and was able to kick a goal as well. So he's going along quite nicely and has brought into what Carlton are doing all over the ground.
All played well for Fremantle, I would have thought, in their 101-point win. So it was hard to get in the coaches' votes, but who missed out?
Yeah, so Hayden Young, 2nd highest rated player on the ground.
Good player.
For us, didn't get a vote from the coaches. I think if you're the Dockers, this is your asset moving forward.
Yes.
To have Sean Darcy, Luke Jackson, Hayden Young, Caleb Sarong, and then to have Andrew Bracewell. We talked about Carlton early on the year. Don't waste a season at the halfway stage.
Yep.
If you're Fremantle, you can now launch into 2024 knowing that this magnet is part of your centre bounce.
He's a Jordan Dawson in some respects.
He's a star, this guy.
It's a good call, that one.
Star.
Very similar to Jordan Dawson. And a Saints running machine.
Yeah, so we talked about the Saints last week. Their transition game is going to be the reason as to why they potentially make finals or not. Brad Hill is so important to that. So played 92% of his game time across that half forward role, getting up and back across the ground. 5th highest rated player on the ground. Didn't get a vote from either coach, but he's going to be so important in terms of what St Kilda are able to do over the next 2 weeks.
And before
I reckon at some stage, Kane, maybe the week before the finals, we should get Hoyne to determine where the ice block goes if you're going to break down each and every team.
Deploy the ice block, and who should they go on to? Hoyne, before we get to a couple of questions, who was your gem of the round?
So we'll just do a North Melbourne segment here, probably, given that we're not going to talk about him for too much longer. So Harry Sheezel, so he's 15 disposals away from breaking Nick Dacos's record for most disposals in a debut season. So well done, Harry. He'll probably get and break that record this weekend against Richmond on Saturday.
Used it well as well, the footy. And this leads us into our horror.
Yeah, then the horror, unfortunately, for North supporters, I'm going to have to give you a horror. So one of our guys has come up with this. So, Jacob, thank you for this.
Jacob.
So they haven't won since round 2.
Yep.
North. If that continues for the next fortnight, which you would assume that it would, they'll be the first team since Fitzroy in 1964 to not win a game post round 2. So 59 seasons. We haven't seen a team do that for North.
That is not
Melbourne.
great. All right, let's
No, it's not. That is a horror.
That's definitely hard to argue with that. All right, let's get whip through a couple of the questions. Hoyne, you had a great comparison of the mighty Blues in Melbourne a few weeks ago. Where does that sit now?
Yeah, so I don't think anything has changed in terms of that. Carlton may or may not, sort of win a flag this year, but they have everything in order, like Melbourne did at the end of 2020, to launch into next year's campaign. So everything is in order. Carlton know what their, what their system is, what their personnel is, sort of what works and what doesn't work. Perfect to actually launch into 2024. It's exciting for the next 6 weeks, but even more exciting for next year.
Go the Baggers. Here's another one. Is Asava going as badly as it looks at the moment?
Unfortunately for Asava, he is. He was the lowest rated player on the ground against Collingwood on the weekend. A couple of really costly areas down there as well. So yeah, unfortunately, he's not going that well at the moment. Asava.
Hoyne and his fellow colleagues at Champion Data would have to be sad about the retirement of Nic Nat, who spent a fair amount of time across his career as the number 1 ranked player. I know he was one of your favourites.
Yes. No, it was a sad day. There were a couple of tissues out yesterday, unfortunately. There's been 2 Champion Data players for us over the journey. Gary Ablett was one. So we had this rule whenever Gary Ablett came up number 1, well, everything was working, so the stat was right. And then Nic Naitanui. So he was his impact on matches, I don't think we've seen a player impact a game in the period that he has, probably more than what Nic Nat has done.
Now, one coach gave Josh Dacos 1, the other gave him 5. Nat wants to know how his game ranked according to Champion Data.
Yeah, so I can understand where one of the coaches actually came from, and that was the one that gave the 1 vote. So we had him about the 7th or 8th highest rated player on the ground on Friday night. So a good performance.
Ball use or ball winning?
Ball use. Ball use. So he was good. He was good, but there were a couple of players ahead of him.
What about Jay Gresham? Has frustrated the Saints fans for a good number of years. How has his year been so far?
His year's been frustratingly poor for the last 2 months. Fantastic game on the weekend. Can he do it for the next 2 weeks? Who knows?